Welcome back everyone to our second part of our hybrid event, the role of diaspora in domestic politics. My name is Tobias Ryssov and I'm the head of the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation here in Albania. Very warm welcome to our new guest, our new panelist. And without much further ado, I will actually hand over to our brilliant moderator, Neritan Seamini, who will head today's discussion. Neritan, the word is with you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Neritan Seamini. I'm a political analyst and journalist, and in the past months, I have written and I have tried to do as much awareness about the diaspora vote in the Albania's upcoming elections. And it seems like my efforts are rewarded by putting me in charge of this panel's moderation. In the first session, we talked about diaspora and its role from the Albanian perspective. In this second session, we will broaden our perspective by sharing experiences and thoughts from other countries. The role of diaspora both in the home countries and also in the host countries, in basically open in every field, politically, culturally, economically, etc. We all have the pleasure that several important politicians and people with experience in diaspora affairs have joined our discussion, and I would like to introduce first, the members of European Parliament, Sabine Verheyen, who is also chair of the Culture Education Committee in the European Parliament. Also, the rapporteur for Albania for the European People's Party in the European Parliament, Michael Gahler. Also, I have the pleasure to introduce the senator representing diaspora in the Romanian Parliament, Viorel Badea, and two activists of diaspora, one from Moldova, Dimitri Mariami, and the Kosovar Albanian activist, Muhamet Idrizi, who also is one of the leaders of the ODA Association. Thank you all for joining our discussion. It will be actually a discussion, so I will urge that the intervention be short, so we can have a lot of exchange of ideas and give the chance everyone to discuss, but also ask questions. I would like to start by calling the first discussion, so it will be easier. Michael, you are someone that has been following the political developments in Albania as part of your work, but also given your relations with Albania. And you know our difficulties, political, economic, and social difficulties, especially when it comes to European integration and our standards that we should achieve. In Albania, there is a kind of well-defined, let's say, opinion that a lot of people from Albania have migrated, the best have gone, and unless they will contribute in the political and economic development of Albania, we will not be as fast and as sure in our efforts to integrate into the European Union, but also to improve economically. What are your thoughts in this regard, given your knowledge about Albanian capacities, political and economic capacities?
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Hello, Sabine. Dear friends, and thanks to the Adenauer Foundation for facilitating this meeting. Indeed, I mean, when you look at different countries with diasporas abroad in the European Union, well, of course, there is a broad spectrum of motivations. I mean, we have also diasporas who want to integrate in the host country and get rid of the past and assimilate. But inside the European Union, when it comes to countries that are on the way or that have only relatively recently started to be a member, there is amongst the diasporas mostly a great interest for the development in the country where they came from. And of course, also, well, depending to each country, a will to contribute actively to the development. Now we have different situations. We have countries with the diaspora where the diaspora is entitled to vote, so they can make a difference. I mean, we have seen it even inside the European Union. I think in Romania, the diaspora vote has been really important to make a difference. We have seen the diaspora vote in Moldova. We have seen it in other countries, and I think in Albania it would also make a difference. Yeah, if it were possible to vote to the extent wished. And the one extreme, in inverted commas, diaspora vote that I have noted is with Tunisia. They have even set up foreign constituencies. So inside Europe, there were several Tunisian parliament seats to be filled by the diaspora. So that was the widest, so to say, approach to include actively those who are abroad. And of course, in many countries, including Albania, well, you said the best have left. Well, of course, those who leave any country are the more active ones, are the ones that leave with hopes and expectations. And but contrary to dramatic situations that we find in desperate countries in Africa, where somebody really doesn't really want to go home again, I hope still that for those Albanian diaspora that is currently in the European Union, that many of those, in the moment when they feel either they have personally gained enough strength and or collected money or learned enough in universities, that they definitely have the motivation to return home and contribute to the development of the country. Now, given the political setup in Albania, with quite a confrontational situation, which is not unique for Albania. We see it in almost all the countries in transition, that the political landscape is set up by very confrontational approaches between the major parties, so the Democratic Party and the Socialists in Albania. That is not the constellation to set up a grand coalition as we see in Germany, as an example. To the contrary, we have a situation where the current opposition even is boycotting parliament, which I am not very happy about in no country. I just had a discussion yesterday also with Georgians in the Caucasus, where our friends from the EPP are also doing that. So my point is to say that all political, even when there is a harsh mistrust and suspicion, perhaps even justified suspicion of the handling of elections or administration in, like it is in Albania, and Mr. Rama is one that makes no concessions and wants the power as a whole and totally. I mean, Sabine will refer probably to the demolition of the National Theatre. I mean, to behave in such a way that is outrageous. And of course, that causes outrage not only in Albania, but also throughout the European Union. But I think what is important for the diaspora is to, I would say, to join forces when they say we want to contribute. So if in a given country there is a possibility for the diaspora to vote, do it. And if it is not yet or the case, then they should demand it. And there should be, so to say, in the political debate in a given country, the possibility to open such option that the diaspora, perhaps at least those who have left in the last 10 years or so. I mean, if you have been outside for generations, it doesn't make sense. But those who have left because of the situation, perhaps in a given country, that they should still have the option, if they want to return home, to do that. And when it's not about elections, I mean, I'm aware of interesting examples of the African diaspora in Europe, who are organizing discussion fora, how to improve investment climate in their home countries where they are from, and to organize ways and means to to promote investment in their home country. I think that is another aspect. But it, of course, especially in countries like Albania, which are in principle on the road towards the European Union, the main idea is, of course, to see to it that the framework conditions within the pre-accession agenda are such that investment is welcome, that jobs can be created, that there is rule of law, that there is the possibility, an investor-friendly atmosphere, which provides more options for development. So currently in Albania, well, we are ahead of elections, and we'll see what the outcome will be. But the agenda is the same, regardless who wins. And I would hope that our friends from the Democratic Party, regardless the outcome, whether they, in the moment when they win the elections, they will of course assume their seats. But if they stay in opposition and still find the result is something only because they have been unfairly treated, please take your seats and take the protest into the parliament and not on the squares only outside. There as well, but the main thing is inside the parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll be talking a little bit later about the right to vote of diaspora and shared experience of some of the countries, but I'll call on Sabine. The cultural dimension is always thought that is one of the main bridges between diasporas in the host country and the home country. How do you see this, the role of cultural sharing and the cultural involvement of both diaspora where they live, but also diaspora when it comes to the home country, in this case of Albania? For example, the case of the National Theatre is a noted case. There was that was considered like a national monument, a national treasure, part of a national memory, but then a government decides to bring it down and nobody can have a say, not in Albania and neither those that have left Albania. How do you see this cultural dimension in the relations between diaspora and the home country, but also in a more broader context, diaspora and the host country, in terms of Albania integrating in the European Union?
First, I would like to say thank you for inviting me and having the possibility to discuss with you. Being chair of the Culture and Education Committee in the European Parliament, I clearly say that the cultural dimension, especially when it comes to identification, when it comes to setting up a known spirit, setting up cultural and societal life in a country, but also building bridges towards others, also towards the diaspora. The cultural aspect is very, very important. And that was the reason why we also, as Cultural Committee in the European Parliament, were quite upset about what was going on with the National Theatre, because we are always fighting for our cultural heritage in Europe. And even I don't like it, or even I have another political position or other things, it's part of our history. It's part of the identification of a country, of a society. And that's the reason why it should not be destroyed out of political reasons. The theater became a symbol also for the opposition towards some actions that were taken politically. And as that, I think it was also taken as a symbol from the other side to break down the walls. And I think it's very important to see this cultural dimension also for people living in the diaspora. Their own culture, their own heritage is always quite important. We see that also in other groups of people living for a long time in other countries. They develop, or they don't develop in the way they do when they are at home. They see their bridge in the culture they know from the times they stepped out. So it's very important to set up these bridge also on the cultural level towards the diaspora, so that there is not a standstill outside the country while the country itself is moving and developing, but also the diaspora must take part in the cultural and societal development in the home country. That's important to set up these bridges, to build these bridges also on the cultural, but also on the educational level, and also to engage from state side towards the diaspora, but also from the diaspora side towards the own country. And I think we should support these bridges, and that is always also European politics, that we want to have these cultural exchange, that we want to learn also from each other, to learn about heritage, common heritage, but also the differences. Being united in diversity is one of the main issues in the European Union, and so it should also be for those, or part of the thinking of those countries who want to be part in the European Union in future. But that means, on the one hand, to develop, but also to safeguard our common cultural heritage, and that's the reason why I think it is important to have a close exchange between the diaspora and the society in the country where you do come from, in Albania.
Thank you very much, Sabine. When we discuss about diaspora's role in the home country, their right to vote and to be part of the most important political decision for a society is at the top of the agenda. As we know, and Michael also mentioned in its discussion, Romania has successfully implemented the vote for the diaspora. Viorel, can you share what is the experience and what is the effect of such an important political development in the case of Romania?
I guess Viorel hasn't yet entered the room. I guess he's still in the Senate meeting, but
Okay.
I guess also Dumitru, since he's from Moldova, but also part of the Romanian diaspora, he can share some of his experiences, both being part of both diaspora communities. So Dumitru, if you can also share some experiences with us, with the Albanian diaspora, but also with the public who is hearing us, from your perspective, how was your engagement, and regarding also the importance of the vote, of the absentee vote?
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. I am part of the two diasporas, Romanian and Moldovan. That's historically what has happened, that we have both citizenships, but I will leave the Romanian aspect to Mr. Badea. I suppose he knows it better. I will speak for Moldova, and what happened is that I think, first of all, that me, as part of diaspora for 3 years, I've been involved in processes in Moldova before leaving the country. I was a cultural manager for like almost 20 years, and I've been also part of the policy making in the area of culture, and I initiated and also participated as co-author of the cinema law of Moldova. So I've been working with the ministries in Moldova for about 10 years, and we had about 10 ministries, by the way, governments in the last 10 years. And what happened this year was impressive on one side, and it's about the difference that we made. First of all, it was a record presence at the voting polls, and we had the votes from diaspora for the president, for the actual president, Mrs. Maia Sandu, has been 243,000 votes from diaspora, which is about 27% of her total votes. So we did make a difference, and this is rather a protest against the actual power. What happened now? Why diaspora did this huge involvement is due to the processes at home, due to the corrupt ex-president, due to the corruption that was spreading and due to the processes that somehow brought the Moldova to a very uncertain situation. And why did it happen this year? I suppose it was a longer process, and it all started, I guess, around 2009. So it was more than 10 years ago, when we somehow changed the power. We had a communist party, a ruling party. We had a communist president at that time, like for about 8 years. And then in 2009, we had the Democrats taking over. By Democrats, by the way, in Moldova, by Democrats, we also mean pro-European forces, because it happens so that usually the communist parties and the socialist party, which is now ruling, they are pro-Russian. So it was a sequence of events that brought to what happened this year in the presidential elections. And the first one is that I think, and it's subjective, it's not necessarily based on some statistics, but first of all, the quality of the diaspora grew very much in the last years. And that's good on one hand and bad on the other hand. But this is due to a non-economical migration that happened in the last years, meaning that a lot of people left Moldova or fled Moldova, not for poverty reasons, but just for better options, for better opportunities. So those people who left, they have good jobs, they are very well integrated, but they also have a better understanding and information about what's happening at home. That's one thing. The other thing is a very vehement attitude of the ex-president against the diaspora, because he used to throw several times very bad words about diaspora, and he was trying constantly to deny the role or the constitutional right of the diaspora to be involved in the home processes, you know. But we are more than 1 million in outside the country, which is out of a 3.8 million population. That's a big number. So we decided, and we decided that we have the constitutional right, and his attacks, constant attacks, have brought us to this decision to get involved and to participate in the home elections. I also want to stipulate that the diaspora is very much involved in the economic situation of Moldova. For example, the remittances from outside Moldova constitute about 16% of the GDP, which means, well, it's quite a low GDP in Moldova, but however, this is about $2 billion only in 2019. And then besides these remittances, besides these direct injections in the economy, there were a lot of projects with consisting of help and donations into several different and a lot of social projects, and a lot of projects have been supported in Moldova. And these all factors, and also the growing aggressiveness of Russia towards the ex-Soviet countries, including Moldova. And then we had several years ago, by the way, which was an important factor, we had an embargo of the Moldovan agricultural products, especially wines. And that was actually the turning point when the European Union, with the government at that time, decided that it's time to redirect or refocus our exports. And Russia became more and more aggressive. So the population, the thinking, let's say, population decided that enough is enough. So we got constant growing support from EU. We decided that EU is our future to be, and that's how we constantly try to get involved in Moldovan politics. So that's more or less a few factors about why this happened and how this happened. And I suppose I have to tell that this small victory of a pro-European Democrat and non-corrupted president is just the beginning, because we are a parliamentary constitution republic, and the president without a political support from the parliament is not able to do much of a change. On the other hand, we have a very corrupt parliament now, and the majority of the parliamentary majority is very corrupt, and the quality of the members of the parliament went down quite a lot in the last years. So this quality, this unqualified, and this corrupt people that acceded to power somehow determined the diaspora to get involved and try to do some difference. But it's just the beginning. The winning of the elections, of the parliamentary elections, proved that we are forced, but did not yet make the real change in Moldova.
Thank you, Dimitri. And now I'd like to turn to the case of Kosovo. In Kosovo, in the elections of 2019, there were about a little more than 30,000 votes from the diaspora. And in the elections that were held this Sunday, there were at least 100,000 people that got a ballot for voting. We don't know yet how many of them voted, but most of them have voted. At least the estimations are that more than 80,000 people from the diaspora have voted, when the total number of voters was 1.7 million. So it's a considerable participation of the diaspora. Muhamet, apart from your right to vote and to influence the election of the government, how much is the Kosovo diaspora involved in the, let's say, economic life and social life in Kosovo? And what kind of best practices you suggest in the case of Albania, given that there is a lot of similarities between both Albanians from Kosovo and Albanians from Albania's diasporas? Thank you.
First of all, përshëndetje from Hamburg. I want to thank for the invitation. I can give you like a fresh view on what happened in diaspora according to the election process in Kosovo. OTA, it's the Organization of Albanian Academics in Hamburg. German Albanian Academics was founded like 2 years ago. We have around 50 people who are with academical background from Albania, from North Macedonia, and from Kosovo leading the organization. So I want first to point out that the Albanian diaspora is in political, social, and economical rights according unique. So we don't make like this divide aspect on the political point when we talk, because we have really similar problems. So this election was really special because it was an election between generations, I would call that, and I think it's something similar that we have in Albania, because the young, well-educated, pro-democratic, pro-European Union generation in the diaspora has like enough of the corrupt systems we have in our home countries. And there might be maybe a little bit of difference between Albania and Kosovo according to the possibilities in elections, because for me personal, there is not a big difference between Partias Socialista, the Partis Demokratike in Albania. So there is like an alternative missing that young pro-European people could elect. So what happens in Germany? After we had, in the last years, we had like no kind of information from our institution about the people who have the right to vote. How you might know, people from Kosovo, even if they are born in Germany and have one parent coming from Kosovo, they have also the right to vote even if they have a German passport, because the young generation or the young migration is still very well connected to their home country. They have like they have family there, they have also a lot of money they brought to their home countries, are also influenced by political decisions that are made. So for example, what I was really missing was that our consulates and especially our embassy give some kind of information from KCZ, even if they have to be political neutral, about the people who have the right to vote. So while they did not do their job or did not do the things they will get paid for, the other institutions, like ODA and other organizations, made the decision to create like a platform and to interact about their rights to vote independent from political parties. So we had also people in organizations, for example, in Stuttgart or in Freiburg or in Frankfurt or in Berlin, who might have a different point of view according to political parties, but who were not agreeing about the form the election commission and also the state's institution act to a very important right, the right to vote that is in the constitution. So we created like an unofficial platform with some people, some chairmen of different organizations in the diaspora, and made like a campaign to registrate first of all the people in the time they have to be registered. We had a lot of problems. I can tell you, like really small problems. For example, people wanted to vote, they didn't have a printer, so we print the documentation for them, brought them at home to the people, even to COVID problems we had, or people came under really strict conditions to help them to make the registration process. After we made the registration process, we realized that our first enemy, and I think this problem will be also a problem in Albania, is not the political party, it's the election commission, KCZ. Why was election commission a really corrupted and big enemy of us? I have the feeling sometimes when KCZ in Albania is talking, it's like similar when Valdete Doka was talking during the last months in Kosovo, because the election commission, for example, did not prepare the infrastructure by IT for the registration of the votes. There were a lot of people sending their documentation by email, and the email was just full. So nobody took care to think about the aspect that maybe emails will go back or people won't have the possibility. At the last day, for example, people sent their emails at 3 o'clock, even the deadline was 6 o'clock, so the emails came back. A lot of people could not make the registration. Then we had this famous number of 175,000 registrations, and KCZ went to television and told us, well, there are a lot of emails who were sent double, so duplications. So we have to correct the number. They correct the number first to 130,000 down, and then at the end, they correct the number to 103,000 people who have the right to vote. And those 30,000 discrepants, they had not the possibility to make a protest by PZAP, that next institution, by email. So they have to be physically there, even they were like in the United States or in Australia, and everybody knew that it's not possible to make this. The short time we had after the registration to complain about the process and the situation made it also impossible to send like on the post way or by post to send the documentation to complain. So KCZ, especially the commission and the parties who are inside the KCZ, made everything they could do to stop the process. Why? Because the Albanian diaspora is something really different to a lot of other diasporas, and sometimes I miss this conversation also in the European policy, and I think we should be more confident on that point. The young Albanian diaspora in most cases is voting anti-corruption, is voting reformation, is voting innovation in their home countries. Not only the fact that, for example, in Kosovo, remittances are the same GDP of the country by sending money and bring money during summertime, but also in cases in social aspects, in exchanging programs on education, even if you are not part of Erasmus Plus, for example, or other projects that we have in combinations. So we know that 43,000 people sent like their vote, but we don't know how many votes we have. And now the newest clue of KCZ is that they stopped the registration for 2 days, or the verification of the votes, because they created like a case that some votes from Austria are like falsificated. So they have first to check all the votes by country. And after they found like this case from Austria without a document from justice, we can start the verification. So we think the verification will start tonight. I don't know when, but tonight. And this election votes from diaspora, I think will bring the leading party, lëvizja vendosje, the number they need like to get the absolute majority over 60 or 61, I guess. So I'm really curious, and I know that this time there was such a high identification and unification in the diaspora of the Albanian Kosovars to change something in their home country, because if we don't do it on our own, I'm not so optimistic that somebody else will do it. It will not be European Union doing it. It won't be US doing it, but we have to do it on our own.
Thank you, Muhamet. Both what Dimitri shared with us and what Muhamet shared with us are some difficulties that are faced when diaspora has the right to vote and exercising this right to vote. In the case of Moldova, there were political attacks. And in the case of Kosovo, there were technical difficulties that might have been created in order to discourage the vote of diaspora. But in both cases, such a vote happened and it was successful. Badea wants to comment on something before we... Actually, yes. Let's open the floor for discussion from everyone.
Yes, so we would like also to make it a little bit interactive. And in this connection, since the two last speakers, Dimitri and Muhamet, mentioned their engagement in on the topic of the diaspora vote, it is for us also important to talk about this. We have the experience from our organization. We have been engaged as an interest groups in the consultation of the Central Election Committee in Albania. And actually, you have the luxury, let's say, that in Moldova and in Kosovo, you have the right to vote or the absentee vote. From our perspective, we as Albanians, we can vote within the country if we take the plane and vote here on the ground, but we cannot vote from the countries we are out of country. So, and in this context, we're facing both problems. I mean, on the one side, the political parties that generally they speak publicly, but that don't have the will to make further steps in order to realize this constitutional right to vote. But on the other side, we have bureaucracy and bureaucratic, let's say, reasons. And in this context, the Central Election Committee plays a role. I mean, we have been, as I mentioned, we have been an active voice within the Central Election Committee, and we see that there is lacking of infrastructure, there is lacking of technical infrastructure, there is lack of personal capacities, and there is also this culture of the last minute. So they think that everything could be realized within the last minute, where other countries have taken years realizing this. And in this context, this way of working and this culture is translated for us in having no will to realize it. And since you mentioned, Muhamet, the European Union and also the support of the, let's say, European institutions, and we have here the both guests from within the European Parliament. So I would ask, because we are lacking a little bit also the pressure from the European, let's say, political actors towards the political landscape in the country. So normally, as you mentioned, Albania has a long path toward like an integration and associational process towards the European Union. But from your perspective, is diaspora and the right to vote part of these discussions, part of this, let's say, process? And given your experience on the ground and your experience, as you mentioned, Michel, the boycotting and bulldozing experience of the main political parties, isn't it also eminent that European political decision makers put pressure also onto the political parties to engage the diaspora, to bring a new perspective, and also to make use of their experience gathered in democratic countries?
Thank you for asking this question. Well, I think our agenda with Albania is the one that we have agreed on in the pre-accession and now in the accession negotiation part. With regard to, personally, I can say, yes, I would wish that, especially in such countries in transition as Albania and others who are on their way to the EU, it would be wishable that those who are active, those who are the ones who have already a bigger horizon, so to say, to see how things are developing and looking from the country from outside. Personally, I would wish that they would have the right to vote. But I have to say, there is no European or global or whatever agreed standard that a country has to allow it. All the countries have their different traditions, and they can also change their legislation, but it's not, so to say, part of the acquis to demand that the diaspora must have the right to vote. This discussion must be conducted in the given country, in this case in Albania. You can use Kosovo as an example, but look, they are allowed. You can use Romania, you can use Moldova, you can use others where there is this right. And I would say in the moment when there is a situation that there is a parliamentary majority to have it in Tirana, in your case, then they should do it and foresee it for the next elections. But we from outside, I think on this issue are well advised not to impose it or to allege it, because then it becomes also quickly a partisan issue. If the EPP were to demand the vote of the diaspora, then Rama would clearly say, well, they have their intentions and their friends have demanded it from them. So I'm not demanding that, neither from the government to do it, nor from our friends in the Democratic Party to demand it because we want it. It is your decision in this or that direction to have it. So that's my answer on that.
Michael, thank you very much for your answer. Just to mention here, also for the public, it is a right that Albanians have in the constitution. We just want to make it technically possible so that we don't have to take the plane and come here and vote, because right now every Albanian citizen, wherever they live, they can vote. So just to add this to your point, but Muhamet brought a very important topic there, that at the end of the day, it's us who have to put the pressure on our politicians to get our rights. Every support that we can get from countries where we count on help is always welcome. And before I pass it to Nathan again, just want to thank again Dumitru for his example of Moldova. I didn't know the numbers, and it's impressive and very motivational to see such an example. And if I compare the both countries and the situation where we find ourselves, it's very, very similar. And this is a big motivation for us to fight forward for this topic, because we see it in the near future, hopefully happening. Thank you from my side, also to Mohamed.
I would like to add something if it's possible, because sometimes I'm really confused about the ambivalency of politicians. On the one side, we complain about corruption structures, and we have a lot of negotiations with ambassadors, like from the countries, for example, in Berlin or in other countries. So I asking myself why there is never a pressure like to think on the European integration process and on the reforms we have to do on that case. So to get the so-called in German Grundrechte, or the main rights for voting. So if we have embassies and you have contacts to those embassies, I think it's not an intervention when you take the possibility to talk more about the point to have the possibility to vote on embassies. We saw it from the Romanian diaspora. It was impressive to see the long queue. I think it was 4 kilometers in the Friedrichstraße, one of the main streets in Berlin, where the Romanians were standing in front of the embassy and waiting for hours to give like their right to change something. We mention every time in like European or in German policy, like Romania is very corrupt and all this stuff. We do the same in Kosovo, we do the same in Albania, but sometimes the European policy is like two-dimensional. I can just only talk about Kosovo aspect of visa liberalization or the not recognition of 5 European countries at one side, and on the other side to change things. European Union has not the diaspora's focus group, and I think this is a big mistake, because European Union countries think in most cases, as long in the Balkan there is like no conflict or everything is secure, like from the secure policy perspective, we don't care a lot. If something happens, then we intervene or then we take care. Instead of using the resource of diaspora as one of the main catalysts and motors to bring those countries in the EU integration process forward, like American diaspora, for example, is doing, or Americans are doing with the Albanian diaspora that have a huge influence in those countries. I think European Union need like a really good strategy on foreign policy according to the West Balkan, because we cannot leave that field to China and Russia and then wonder what happens on the Balkan in security policy when we are not intervening.
If I may,
I would like to step in on that point, if it's possible.
Please do.
You say the European Union should do more on this. The question is always, on the one hand, you have the competences lying with the European Union as such and lying in the member states. And like Michael already said, the right to decide how the election law looks like is the right of the member state, not of the European Union. We have fundamental structures that should be respected. And when there is the right to vote, this right must be enabled for everyone. And that is something there the European Union can again step in when these things are not done correctly. During the negotiations on their way towards the European Union, now also being a candidate for stepping in, there is a possibility to discuss these things, and the European Union is doing these things. And also the question of corruption, you always talked about this problem too, is meanwhile part of the negotiations with the member states who want to be part of the European Union to develop adequate structures. And we get a frequent report on this, and also the Parliament is reacting on these things, where we see that the steps towards the European Union are not done in the right way when it comes to counterfeit corruption, or when it comes to the rule of law. The European Parliament is quite clear in what they say, but again, we have not the competence to decide if the diaspora is allowed to vote or not. That is a decision of the member state and lies in the competence of the member state. That is something that must come from inside the country. That is something the political parties which are in the opposition have to put forward. Also the conditions, the technical conditions, how this can be done is a decision of the members of the state as such. So in this case of Albania. And what we can do is, if these things that are laid down in law are followed correctly or not, so the rule of law is followed correctly or not, or if there are infringements or corruption. So we have to see always, and that seems for many people that the European Union is ambivalent in this. No, the European Union has to stick with the competences of the European Union, and we have to respect the subsidiarity principle that is also one of the core principles in Europe, in the European Union, that the competence that lies with the member states lies there. But what we can do is, if member states are not following their own rules, if they are not following fundamental rights, there we have a possibility to step in and demand clearer structures. But the European Union cannot heal and cannot save all things that are not running well in the state, in the competence of the state as such.
Sabine, if I can just follow up with that. It's clear from the legal point of view, that there is no way that the European Union can influence or force the countries to grant the right to vote. But from a different perspective of inclusion of diaspora in the economic and political life of the home country. And I would like to refer to the conclusions of Sofia Summit about knowledge transfer between diaspora and the home countries, and the European Union, let's say, commitment to support this kind of efforts. And if we can broaden it in terms of those cultural bridges that we spoke about, and the importance of these cultural bridges, both for diaspora with home country and diaspora with the host country. So in this regard, what kind of instruments and what kind of support the European Union can provide to support the links between diaspora and home countries?
First, all countries who are candidates for being a member of the European Union can take part in the Erasmus program. We have an open program for all those who are candidate or associated to the European Union. So there is a possibility of exchange and bringing experience to and back. I think what's also very important is that we support via citizens projects in the Europe for Citizens or Rights and Values program, that there we also support countries that are candidate countries towards, let's say, an active citizenship in the European sense. There are possibilities also to collaborate, to cooperate with institutions or all over Europe, and that can also be diaspora institutions which are engaging and cooperating with organizations in the country as such. So there, I think it is important that we take a look to support member states on their way towards a society that enables democratic participation. That's also an aim the European Union has for CLEAR, and that are things we can support via the programs that are at stake, and when Albania is taking part in these programs. The programs are open for candidate countries, and I think it would be good that these opportunities are used.
Thank you, Sabine. Dimitri, you wanted to make a comment?
I just wanted to emphasize two aspects. One of them regarding the importance of central electoral committees in the elections and in the situation in general, because it happened in Belarus, for example. They are still fighting the central committee who falsificated the elections, and it also, by the way, happened in case of Moldova. And as I was saying before, what happened in Moldova in these last elections happened mainly or mostly out of rage from the part of diaspora, because they felt somehow attacked and discriminated. But this rage was also generated by the fact that the Central Committee in the previous parliamentary elections in 2019 did not open enough voting polls in European countries, so that a lot of Moldovans did not get to vote. So 2019, a lot of people did not get to vote, even though they were queuing. By the way, speaking of the Romanian elections, because I'm voting in those too, I did not get to vote in the Romanian elections as well because of the queues. So this the fact that the Central Electoral Committee did not ensure our right also somehow influenced our decision to get involved and to fight this power. The second thing I wanted to say about the involvement of the influence of the European Union, and in our case it made a huge, crucial actually difference, and it happened in 2014. So we had an embargo from the Russians on our agricultural products, and that's when the European Union decided that it will soften the conditions, and it got a lot of the Moldovan economy got a lot of support and a lot of grants from the European Union in order to refocus and to rebrand even the products and prepare them for a European market. And that's actually when it started. What happens now is it happened in 2014, and eventually we signed, we are not a candidate yet, but we signed the association agreement, which besides a lot of economical, let's say, advantages, it gave us a visa-free regime. So we are outside European Union, but we can travel both east and west without visas. And that made a huge difference. And that's how actually the European Union somehow almost directly influenced the results of the vote. And that's, again, of course, the main power is the internal action, but the internal action can be influenced through not necessarily direct political involvement, because that would be unfair or illegal even, but through economical processes, through grants, or through very focused actions that can change the perception of the population towards towards European Union versus the perception of our bigger Eastern brother, I'd say. So I think European Union can do quite a lot.
Thank you. I would like to raise two questions just for a discussion. The first one, maybe Sabine and Michael can have a better view on that. In the case of Albanian diaspora, especially in Italy and Greece, there are hundreds of thousands of Albanians which are not yet citizens of these countries. They are only Albanian citizens, and they cannot vote in those countries. And given the fact that they cannot vote on the Albanian elections because we don't enable the out-of-country vote, basically you have hundreds of thousands of Albanians which are kind of marginalized from the political life, both in the host country and the home country. I mean, this is one of the issues. Is there any connection with human rights or political participation in these special conditions? And the second issue that I wanted to raise is that, because we're talking about the difficulties, technical difficulties that sometimes the electoral commissions create for discarding the vote. And in both cases that were discussed, Romania and Moldova, we're talking about voting at the ballot stations which were set up in the embassies. What about the mail-in vote? Wouldn't this solve a lot of technical problems and increase the involvement of diaspora because it's easier, it's more accessible and easier to exercise your right to vote from out of the country? Thank you.
Good. I wanted to be polite and ask Sabine to start this time, but okay. Well, I mean, it is of course a problem if somebody technically cannot vote from abroad at home and is on the other side not yet a citizen of the country where he or she lives. I think that is hard to overcome. I mean, we have this discussion occasionally also in Germany about those who have been living in the country for a lot of years and have not yet assumed citizenship, whether they should be allowed to vote if in local elections, perhaps. I mean, we have, and I think that is a good approach, we have restricted the right to vote to citizens and for local elections for EU citizens. I mean, I would like to keep an encouragement for those who would like to participate in elections and motivate them to become citizens when they are living and have a perspective to stay. On the other side, I would really, well, if it were me to decide, I would definitely encourage to make the votes from abroad possible. I mean, the one technical version is the version to allow it in the embassies and consulates, or in some countries it is also allowed in extra facilities in a school or where on a weekend. I mean, when nothing goes on. I mean, there are countries who allow their there are people who are entitled to vote, also to vote outside the embassies. I think in this regard, one can also be generous. I wouldn't have a problem if there were many Albanians in bigger cities that they could also hire a room for that, and not to be depending on the embassy. The postal vote, you spoke of mailing or emailing. I mean, we have in Germany also the possibility for postal vote, to vote from abroad and send in it by postal vote. It has to arrive by the end of the voting day, so there is no delay possible. But so to say, technically the vote by internet or such a remote vote, I would be very cautious, because first of all, technically you cannot assume on the one hand that it will work. On the receiving end at home, we've heard about emails that were simply full. That should not be the case, but also not in all countries where people are entitled to vote, the internet is working in the same way, and then that might be difficult. So I could accept a postal vote that people can, for instance, either could download the ballot paper with a certain registration number, download it and fill it out and send it home by post. That is for me by postal vote. That would be, for me, be technically acceptable. But the other discussion that I started with, if somebody doesn't have the citizenship, I'm afraid in most countries they won't be so tolerant to allow a non-citizen to vote.
Thank you.
I would like just to add, even you allow voting outside the country, for example, via postal vote, you need a structured process for registrating who is voting, because that also must be clear, because the state, in this case Albania, doesn't has a direct impact on the registers in other countries. So they need to add to their registers for elections those people who are living out of Albania. So there must be a clear and transparent procedure that is necessary early enough beforehand an election. And I think that is something you were always talking, or you were already talking about. If you start such a registration process very short time before an election, there is no chance for a correct and clear registration, and in the end also not a chance to vote in the end in a correct way. So if you want to start to become active on the national level for a better system for people in the Albanian diaspora to vote, it would be important first to get a transparent and clear registration process for people living outside Albania to be registered, and not just a few weeks before the elections, but adequate period beforehand, so that everyone can arrange and organize to be registered. And then I absolutely support what Michael is saying. I think online voting in some countries it's working, but I don't know if it's working from outside, and it's also quite difficult to ensure that there is no attack from outside, no foreign interference in that. You know that we have to face many attacks, especially on the internet, and these systems have to be assured in a very strict way when you don't want to have manipulation of elections from outside. You mentioned Russia yourself. These are specialists together with China in influencing and manipulating these things and hacking. So I think it is important that you try to get a clear and transparent process for registration, and in the end also to have a possibility for a postal vote and a physical vote, perhaps in the embassies, in schools, in places where you have a strong diaspora, so that it becomes easier for people living in the diaspora to take their right to vote. But the general question, if you want to allow people from outside to vote, And even people, I know that some people with Albanian roots don't have an Albanian citizenship anymore because they don't have a double citizenship. They have the citizenship of the country where they were born. Even they have Albanian roots. There it will be difficult to give them the right to vote in Albania, because that's not covered anymore by the general question if Albanian citizens can vote. And I think there also you have to discuss how this is possible to have, for example, double citizenships or additional rights if there is a strong relation. I know that also in some countries it is linked, the right for people living in a diaspora is linked to their connection to the country as such. So if you have for decades no contact to your home country anymore, you lose the right to vote in some cases. There are also cases like this. And I think that is also something you have to think about in creating an adequate and fair right for voting, an election right, because it's also a question if someone who is not at all interested or not at all knowing something about the society and the development in the country as such. And I don't talk about you who are interested in what's going on there, but we also see that diasporas can also be manipulated, not knowing what's really going on in practice in a country, but being pushed to vote for something else. So that must also be clear, that the information for the election, that the news, the situation, the election campaigns and all these things are accessible for people living in the diaspora, because that is also very important, because there are also examples where the diaspora of other countries is manipulated and used for own politics. We very often see that in different countries.
If I can just add something just to support with regard to the voting mode. One of the problems that we have still in Albania is that often elections are contested, the election results are contested, and there is an undermining of the legitimacy of the voting. So in the case that the diaspora will be invited to vote, then we should decide on a voting method that will not increase the problems and give more reasons or pretexts to certain parties not to accept the election results. So in this case, the paper vote in the embassies is the safest way, because you can always verify and you can check what the vote was. In terms of electronic voting or even postal voting, then they will be more complicated and will add to the usual disputes that Albanian political parties carry on usually after any election. Lady wants to...
Yes, and to comment on that, and also to clarify a little bit the public who is hearing us, but also you both, and generally the activists, we have within our movement, we have a working group focused only on the topic of the voting out, of the absentee vote. And we have been delivering to the Central Election Committee in Albania briefings, also expertise relating the three methods that you mentioned to vote outside the country or to vote abroad. And as you mentioned, there are three possibilities: the electronic vote, the vote by mail, or the vote on the ground at the, let's say, embassies or diplomatic representations. And we as a movement, we have excluded the vote by the digital vote or the electronic vote, but also the vote at the diplomatic representations on the ground, since they have no capacities. A lot of them are geographically spread and not let's say respectively represented in every country. For example, I can give you the example of Canada. In order to, let's say, renew the identity documents, they have to travel till New York, and in this context, even the vote wouldn't be possible in this diplomatic representation. And in this context, since they lack the personal capacities, but also the representation on the ground, we have excluded it as a method. And also considering your concerns that you raised, the hacking and the technological capacities, we have also excluded for these upcoming elections the possibility to do vote by email or electronically. So we have focused mostly on the vote by mail. But even here, we have, as I mentioned before, a lot of excuses, political excuses, bureaucratic excuses, and also the factor time. I mean, as I mentioned, there is these political culture of the last minute, and the entire, I mean, the government now is in the end of the second legislature. So they had 8 years. They came in power in the last. In 2013, they came in power by promising to the diaspora the realization of the diaspora vote, and after 8 years, only during the half year of the last year, they somehow thought, okay, let's talk about the diaspora vote, and also constituted the new election committee and made also constitutional changes to the electoral code. And in this context, the entire process is very delayed. We've raised our concerns regarding this, but not at least even if the absentee vote or the diaspora vote is not being realized, or if it will not be considered by the main political parties, we as an interest group, we are convinced, and we will try to push this topic forward to lobby on different levels, on the ground, to the political parties, but also mobilizing and also factorizing the diaspora and sensibilizing them in order to ask this constitutional right. I see that the Senator Viorel Badea is with us, so I guess Mr. Siamini will introduce him.
Thank you very much. It's possible for me to speak in Italian because I'm not too comfortable to speak in this language. I'm an Italian professor.
I'll translate. I mean, I'll sum up. You can speak in Italian. I will sum up for the rest with my broken Italian. But I mean, still, I'll sum it up for the rest, the main points of yours. So please, you can go on in Italian.
Grazie mille. Allora, Romania c'è una forte esperienza per quanto riguarda la votazione all'estero, perché lo facciamo da tanto tempo. Inoltre, una cosa molto importante è il fatto che noi abbiamo nel Parlamento rumeno dei rappresentanti, dei parlamentari, dei membri del Parlamento che vengono votati all'estero. In questo momento si tratta di 2 senatori e 4 deputati, i quali sono nel Parlamento della Romania perché sono stati votati dalla diaspora rumena, e non solo dalla diaspora, perché noi parliamo anche dalle comunità rumene che vivono nei dintorni della Romania, le comunità autoctone. Parlo di rumeni che vivono in Moldavia, oppure cittadini rumeni, cioè in Moldavia, in Serbia, in Ucraina e via dicendo. Alle ultime elezioni noi abbiamo avuto 800 seggi di votazione all'estero, cioè seggi di votazione organizzate nelle missioni diplomatiche rumene, ambasciate, consolate, istituti di cultura rumeni all'estero, e la maggior parte dei seggi di votazione sono stati dei seggi organizzati nei posti che ci sono stati collocati dalle autorità straniere, cioè nelle scuole, nelle case di cultura, nei seggi dei municipi e via dicendo. Per esempio, alla votazione del Presidente della Romania, all'estero hanno votato un...
Scusa, Senatore, posso traducere questa parte per non creare un po' di monotonia per gli altri?
Sì, certo.
Grazie. I'll just sum up what the senator was saying. So he's talking about the Romanian experience of voting. And in the case of Romania, they have seats which are designated for the diaspora. So they don't only have the right to vote, but also they have assigned seats in their parliament for the diaspora. And actually they have 2 senators that represent the diaspora, which one of them is the senator talking. And they have 4 members of the lower house, deputies, which are elected and they represent the diaspora. They vote not only the diaspora, but also the Romanian communities living outside of Romania, especially in the neighboring countries, including Moldova and Serbia, which are Romanian citizenship. They also have the right to vote. The voting has been done in the ballot in the voting stations, which are opened in the foreign countries. In the last elections, there were 800 voting stations, which were set up in Romanian embassies, consulates, and also Romanian Institute of Cultures in these countries. Another feature of the past elections of the voting was that some of the locations in the foreign countries were selected by the host countries, and they were used schools and other buildings, which were, as he said, which were assigned by the governments of those countries, not by the Romanian government. So that's so far, and I'll ask the senator to carry on. Senatore, puoi continuare, prego.
Inoltre abbiamo provato anche il sistema di voto per corrispondenza. Dal totale dei voti, diciamo, per il presidente della Romania,
corrispondenza vuol dire con posta?
Per posta, sì.
Sì,
per esempio, all'elezione del presidente della Romania hanno votato 1 milione di rumeni all'estero. E da 1 milione di rumeni all'estero, 100.000 hanno votato per corrispondenza. Dal nostro punto di vista è molto importante far parte alla decisione politica, alla decisione amministrativa della Romania, i rumeni che vivono all'estero, perché loro sono il maggiore investitore in Romania. Ogni anno prima della pandemia, ogni anno i rumeni dall'estero, dalla diaspora, mandavano in Romania 7 miliardi di euro ogni anno.
Sì.
Può tradurre.
Okay. To carry on with, so they vote also by post. So they were voting in all the stations, 800 stations which were set up in other countries, but also they had the right to vote by post, which they call by correspondence. In the last elections, there were 1 million Romanians living abroad that voted from out of the country, and out of them, 100,000 they voted by mail vote, so postal vote. In Romania, the involvement of diaspora in voting on the political decision-making is important because of their crucial role in the economic development of the country. They are the main investors, foreign investors, if you can call it like that, in Romania. Every year, they invest more than 7 billion euros in Romania. Senatore?
Per questo noi proviamo adesso di allargare la rappresentatività della diaspora nel Parlamento rumeno. Già io ho introdotto un progetto di legge in base alla quale noi vorremmo raddoppiare il numero dei seggi nel Parlamento di Romania per la diaspora, perché in questo momento all'estero vivono un quarto dei cittadini rumeni. Praticamente noi abbiamo delle stime nelle quali si vede chiaramente che all'estero vivono intorno a 5 milioni di cittadini rumeni. Per questo abbiamo introdotto un progetto di legge per raddoppiare il numero dei rappresentanti nel Parlamento rumeno per la diaspora. Un progetto di legge molto importante.
Given the huge importance that the diaspora plays in the economic development of Romania, there is talk in Romania for increasing the role of diaspora in the political decision-making. And the senator and some others have already drafted a law which will double the representation of diaspora in the Romanian parliament. As the senator told us, there are 2 senators assigned to the diaspora and 4 members of the lower house, deputies. So they want to double that to 4 senators and 8 members of the lower house. It's estimated that at least 5 million Romanians live outside Romania, which accounts for about 1/4 of the Romanian population. Senator? Senatore?
D'altra parte, stiamo discutendo nella coalizione di governo per introdurre una nuova procedura di votazione, la votazione elettronica. Già stiamo un po' radunando delle informazioni, stiamo parlando con dei specialisti per poter vedere se avremo la possibilità di introdurre la votazione elettronica.
There is discussion in the coalition government in Romania to also offer the voting by electronic means. They are in the phase that they are seeing what are all the technical possibilities and technical problems in order to make possible this kind of voting.
D'altra parte è molto importante e sempre abbiamo delle discussioni con i rappresentanti delle comunità rumene all'estero. È molto importante di convincere i rumeni che vivono all'estero di impegnarsi nella politica locale dei paesi dove loro lavorano e vivono, chiaramente. L'anno scorso mi sembra che abbiamo avuto in Italia, per esempio, intorno a 100 persone che si sono candidati per delle posizioni nelle amministrazioni locali in Italia. In Spagna, per esempio, abbiamo anche un sindaco rumeno. Cioè, proviamo di convincerli di impegnarsi pienamente nella politica dei paesi dove loro lavorano, perché hanno questo diritto, essendo contribuenti al budget dei corrispettivi paesi.
Another aspect of the diaspora role is the encouragement that the Romanian government is the Romanian government is encouraging all the Romanian diaspora to get involved in the local politics of the host countries. As an example, in Italy, in the last elections, there were at least 100 candidates for different positions, elected positions in the local government. In the case of Spain, there is already a mayor which is of Romanian origin. And the senator is saying that it's their right to be involved in the local politics of the host country, and the Romanian government is encouraging them to do so, which will improve the relation between diaspora and the host countries. Senatore?
Questo è tutto che volevo raggiungere e sono molto lieto e molto contento che voi avete deciso di prendere questo tema, questo soggetto nella vostra discussione, perché in questo momento, almeno in Europa, le diaspore sono uno dei motori di sviluppo dell'Europa. Vi do un esempio: il 2% del prodotto interno lordo d'Italia esiste praticamente dovuto al lavoro dei quasi 2 milioni di rumeni che vivono in Italia.
Senatore, auguri, perché mi hanno detto che sei eletto il capo dell'associazione delle amicizie Romania-Albania.
Grazie.
To sum up, the senator said that it's the role of the diaspora in both host and home countries is important and should be encouraged. And he gave as an example that in the case of Italy, 2% of the GDP of Italy is created by the Romanians which are living in Italy. By the way, Romanians are the largest non-Italian population. I mean, immigrant population living in Italy. I don't know if I can call the name immigrant because they are part of the European Union. So there is a right there. And at the end, I congratulated the senator because he was elected the head of the friendship association between Albania and Romania in the Romanian parliament.
Thank you very much, Florian. Thank you very much for all of you. And it's a very good job that you make in this moment in Albania. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Sabine and also Michael, they want to talk. So Sabine, you go first, please.
I hope that you get a good basis for cooperation between the Albanian diaspora and the people in political engaged people in Albania. I think it's a big richness you can deliver to your country in engaging with your experience also from other countries to your home country, and I think it would be good if also the political decision takers and political responsibles in your country see that it is good for a country to include the experience, the knowledge, and the well-educated young people from the diaspora in the development of your own country. And as we can in our competences, we will support you in doing so.
Thank you. Michael?
Well, thank you very much. I saw a question to me in the questions and answer section with regard to the upcoming elections. I mean, and the wish, of course, of Edi Rama to win at all costs. Well, I don't know how far he will make use of the public media or of the ways and means that are at his disposition. I mean, the opposition is not completely without any capacity. Well, there will be an election observation mission organized by the OSCE and implemented by ODIHR. And I mean, hopefully there will be some members of parliament in end of April allowed also to watch that. I hope that we'll be in a position to go. But I think I'm insofar confident that every participant in this election is aware that you are being watched with interest and constructively, of course. In this regard, that was the answer to the question that was raised. I wanted to raise a bit of a different issue, and that addresses specifically the Albanian diaspora abroad. First of all, is there one Albanian diaspora abroad? So do you all meet, or does it make a difference whether you are from Albania itself, from Kosovo, or from Northern Macedonia? So the question why I'm asking that is because you, of course, if you are, so to say, abroad all united, might that be a driving force for development that Mr. Albin Kurti just raised today in Euronews, saying, well, if possible, but of course not at the cost of a civil war, I would be in favor of a referendum for reunification or unification of Kosovo and Albania. That is, of course, for all normal foreign policy makers who are normally status quo fetishists, something that is not wanted, and in given circumstances, changing borders is something also not necessarily wanted, but still a united Albania would still not mean a strong or a mightful or powerful, but we are not at this point. But my question is, what role would potentially play the Albanian diaspora abroad? Is it a fragmented one according to the three parts where Albanians are normally from, or would it be a diaspora that would promote this idea of unification? And it's a tricky thing, it's a hot potato, but as it has been addressed by Mr. Kurti today in Euronews, I just wonder how the Albanian diaspora abroad feels about that.
I would like to give an answer if it's possible, because I like this conversation we have in Germany all the time, especially with politicians from the CDU. I think this is like a phantoma that is used when diaspora is forcing reforms and invitation, and they take care of their fundamental rights. We could think about every kind of how should I say, every kind of idea that we have in the room. I think everybody has to do his own homeworks, and every political party, every country has to take care in which direction they bring politicians forward. Fact is that the most Albanian countries are pro-European. And in most European countries, there is like a anti-enlargement policy in most cases, driven by populistic party against the West Balkan. So there is a big asymmetry. We should talk more about this one than about the idea of unification of countries or not. For example, for me, if Albania doesn't have enough embassies or consulates, why not offering possibilities to open the doors to make the fundamental right to vote possible? It's not important in which place you vote, if it's a school or if it's another embassy or if it's a state institution. It's important to get the fundamental right. In the last years, the CDU, I know, especially in Kosovo, they were a little bit too pro-LDK and were not taking care about the other problems that we have in the Western Balkan in aspect of EU integration. I just want to say that one too.
Yeah, let me just add to that. Thank you, Muhamet. So instead of focusing on the specific plans that each party might have, if it's European or in Albanian countries, we as a movement are focusing specifically on the Albanian diaspora of Albania. That's why we called also the website that, and there is a reason about that. The reason is that the Kosovo diaspora is a bit older out there and much better organized, and we are nowhere in this direction. So that's why we are starting to go this way. But to talk about, so it's a bit fragmentized for the moment, but there are many ways that Albanians can unite for the time being. Is by uniting their history books, their school books, by opening their borders or facilitate exchange in the economical view. And Michael, we have a very good example. I always take this example in such discussions. We have the example of Germany, West and East Germany. So it could be seen for the future, something like that. We are all aiming for referendums. This is a right, a democratic right that we want to have more in Albania. So if at the end of the day, it's the decision of the people to go for such a referendum, I personally would be supporting it. But our focus right now is, as we said, to make Albania better and stronger. And I think Bledar would like to mention something.
Yes, and I mean, since you are also the voice of the European people in the European Parliament, I mean, the best integration of both countries is their path into the European Union. So if they both integrate individually in the European Union, then we have the unification not only of the Albanians within their, let's say, cultural dimension, but also an historical dimension. But we will have also like a common dimension within the European Union. And in this context, I guess this is also the discourse that the main parties play, but this is also our approach. So since as Florian mentioned, since the Albanian diaspora, it's a new diaspora after the fall of the communism, and it has been fragmentized. It has not had an articulated and well-articulated political voice from the diaspora towards political decision makers, either on the European level or at the Albanian level. It is important first to unify the Albanian diaspora from Albania and to unify their approach towards the political leaders and toward the political party in order to bring a new perspective, a new voice. And after we look forward also to the, we didn't mention this, but this is also like our aim. Actually, I thought it as a question, but since everyone is concluding, I mean, for us, it's also important to act as an alternative voice to the European decision makers, since the most of us has accumulated experience, professional experience in different issues, either energy, environment, culture, education, economics, and so on. So we want to act also and operate as an alternative voice beside the Albanian voice or the government voice. I mean, we know along the integration and association process and also the intergovernmental talks that Albania is going to open with the member states, it is important also to have an alternative voice towards this process. It would be interesting also for European counterparts to hear an evidence-based expertise from the diaspora, how they see the development on the ground on each chapter that is going to be opened. And back to your question, as I said, the best integration is to be integrated both Kosovo and Albania and North Macedonia and the Western Balkan 6 into the European Union all together and enjoy the 4 freedoms of movement.
we have still a few more minutes before I open the floor for questions. If there is any, I'll just like to sum up what we discussed so far. Michael gave a general view of the cases when they have basically started voting over the diaspora. He mentioned Romania, mentioned Moldova, Tunisia, so these successful cases, but also emphasizing that there is no European policy or obligation that countries which are aspiring to become members or that are members should offer the vote to diaspora. And also raise the concerns that when it comes to the voting, we should be careful what kind of mode of voting we choose, because there are difficulties on that, especially when it comes to cases like Albania, where there is mistrust in holding elections and there are problems with elections still. What Michael suggested, that if there is will and if there is demand, then we should do it. We should give the vote to the diaspora, which is a good development. Sabine concentrated on the cultural dimensions that diasporas play as a bridge between both host countries and the home countries, and the important role they can still play in their home countries. She talked about the different support programs that the European Union has to encourage this kind of cultural links and connections, and also the important role that diasporas can play in the host countries. Then Dimitri brought the case of Moldova, the importance of the diaspora vote in the election of a reformist president, and the role that he hopes this diaspora will play for the parliamentary elections, but also brought the case of the resistance, especially from the political establishment of giving the right to vote to diaspora and involving them in the political life. Muhamet gave the case, his experience from Kosovo, and concentrated more in the technical difficulties that the diaspora faced during the past elections, especially from the institutions that were managing the elections, which to his opinion was trying to discourage the vote of diaspora for certain political reasons. And then we had the case of Romania, when Senator Viorel Badea brought a general overview of Romania, which is a specific case that besides the right to vote for diaspora, they also have assigned representation in Romanian parliament, both in the Senate and in the lower house. And also he talked about the encouragement to increase this kind of participation and to increase the role of diaspora in the political decision-making in Romania, but also to encourage diaspora to be involved more in the political life of the host countries. And then we discussed some general issues again about the vote and the problems of involving diaspora, but emphasized the importance of involving diaspora in the political life of the home country, because as Sabine mentioned at the end, countries like Albania, they need diaspora, they need their knowledge, they need their contribution in order to make sure that they will progress both in terms of economic development and European integration. So this is more or less what we discussed. I hope that I was loyal to what you said. Now, if there is any question for the remaining minutes, you are welcome to ask whomever you want to ask.
Or even from a panelist. So if you have any question to the activists from the diaspora, or to somehow a call to the Albanian community who is following us live, and the Albanian diaspora abroad, or the Albanian citizens, you are welcome and feel free. So we will try to gather some questions if questions were raised via Zoom or via Facebook. And in the meantime, if any one of you has questions, feel free to raise them.
Lena, I would like to raise one question to you. How in concrete do you try at the moment to involve in the processes in the country itself? Have you concrete contacts to decision takers, to policymakers in the country to push for your ideas, to bring in your experience? How is the direct connection to the political level in Albania?
Thank you, Sabine. Thank you for your support, first of all, but also for the good questions. Yes, indeed, we have been engaged, very much active on the ground, but also, I mean, thanks to the digital ways via Zoom. So as I mentioned in the first panel, so what we are trying, we are working on both dimensions or both levels. First, we are working abroad where we are in order to unify the diaspora, but also to get expertise from the professionals who have gathered our working groups. And in the concrete topic of the vote, I mentioned that we have delivered to the Central Election Committee our, let's say, position regarding to the absentee vote, and the position also considering all the arguments pro and contra why this method works or why this method doesn't work for the capacity given in Albania. On the other side, we have been very vocal towards the political parties. We have raised the question of identity documents. I don't know if Mr. Galler has followed up the question of the identity documents. Almost 1 million identity documents is supposed to, let's say, lose its validity till the April of 21st. And in this regard, the Central Registration Bureau, let's say, has been very slow, and this topic was raised through thanks to our movement, but also thanks to the Central Election Committee, who asked actually directly what is the state of play in this regard. And given the pandemic situation where almost the diplomatic and consular representations have no possibilities to offer appointments, we have raised the concerns, but also asked the Ministry of Home Affairs in order to extend the validity of the identity documents. They have done this in the last year due to the pandemic situation and have extended the validation for half a year till end of 2020, and we asked from the government and the Ministry of Home Affairs and Foreign Affairs to extend the validation of the identity documents in order to allow not only to the people on the ground in Albania, but also to the diaspora to have the right to vote. As I mentioned, we have also pushed for this issue to the political parties. We have held meetings with the leader of the Democratic Party, with the president of Albania, with also the current Ministry of State for Diaspora. And but on the other side, we are only one, let's say, vocal voice, and it's a little bit a new landscape. Normally there was no voice from the diaspora before. There are 3 other organizations who are cooperating with us, and I want also to thank their contribution: the Organization of Albanian Lawyers in Canada, the organization called Germin, and also KKD, the Albanian Council of Diaspora. They have been also partners of us in the consultation with the Central Committee, and we have tried to push this issue forward. The current situation is that, as I mentioned, due to the political excuses and bureaucratic excuses, we are at the last, let's say, time limit in order to realize this for the upcoming elections. And what we have seen from the Central Election Committee, they said we need the political consensus in order to put forward and to, let's say, adapt the drafts to realize this law. And they developed only one draft where we gave our amendments and our, let's say, thoughts, but they lack a number of drafts that address the registration, the method how to vote, the way how the voting process will go on, but also the let's say, the election counting after. And since we have let's say, a bad experience with the election counting and a vote rigging, we will come out with a press statement then that this process is not going forward, and and claim also and point the finger also to the responsible parties and generally also the party in government, which had 8 years to realize this constitutional right for the diaspora and has not done anything towards this. But Sabine, be sure this is the beginning. And for the public also, this is the beginning and only one topic of our movement. I mean, as I mentioned, we have different working groups. We have an environmental and energy working group who is very vocal so to the Albanian institution, and have been sending statements and also letters asking to public projects that Albanian government has closed with different entities and asking for transparency. And this goes on with educational and cultural issues and so on. So in this regard, I also want to use the chance to thank you both for your support, but also for your, let's say, will to connect and network us with further decision makers on the European level.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you also from my side. I would like, of course, to invite all those, in my case, it's Germany, but that extends to all the other diaspora people in different European countries. Please engage yourselves in the same way as you engage for your home country or former home country. But I have noticed already in the European election campaign, where I had an event with Albanian diaspora, how integrated and how active and how actively you are contributing to our economy, to our society. So all of those who are abroad, and in my case in Germany, in our case, I would cordially invite you, well, to continue your work as diaspora, but also to actively contribute to our activities. So when it is about political parties, that is an Adenauer event, I assume that there is a certain proximity to the CDU, or in Bavaria, the CSU. So cordial invitation to all to do both tracks, work with Albania, but also with us to further get our societies forward. Thank you, and that's from my side.
I just wanted to answer to one question that is raised in the chat. If you think that necessary changes in Albania can be done without the involvement of the diaspora, I think the diaspora will have a crucial role in these changes, because you can bring in experience from outside, you can bring in knowledge, you can bring in ideas that are not, let's say, just from the inside, but with a broader view. And I think that's the reason why I'm convinced that it is to the best of the country if the diaspora is involved in these development processes, political development processes, in a stronger way than it is at the moment. And I hope that your engagement will be seen by the policy makers in your country, and that they really understand how important this involvement can be for their steps forward towards the European Union and towards a better structure in the country and the development.
Thank you. Tobias would like to have some few words of.
Well, I think if there's no further questions from inside, maybe the final words to wrap this thing up, because we're good in time, but I think an hour and 45 minutes is good time, and everyone on Zoom might be tiring now. Let me first start with re-emphasizing one fact that Bleda already mentioned in terms of the European future of Albania, or Albanians, let's put it this way. I think this is a very important point, because if we just remember how many issues we had in Europe in the last decades after World War II, and even before, with territorial issues. So, I mean, think of Northern Ireland, think even of, in Germany, the German Eastern Province and the refugees, the Vertriebene, and how these issues have been solved by integrating these countries, or further advancing the European Union, because there are no issues anymore. And I believe that, you know, this vision is a good vision for the future, also for the Western Balkans, for Kosovo, for Albania, for Serbia as well. Because why should we argue about some valleys in Presevo or in Kosovo when we can have the freedoms to move around, to settle anywhere, and to have the protection for all people and for minorities as well. So in this sense, I believe we made a good start today with having a very European discussion, having involved, people from Romania, Moldova, from the European Parliament, also in different languages. So Neritan, thank you very much for a very spontaneous interpreting on your behalf. So yeah, very much thanks a lot everyone for contributing, all the panelists there from the European Parliament, from the different parts of Europe. Also thanks to the first panelists we here this morning when we discussed in Albanian sort of inner Albanian issues. But I believe with this issue or with these topics, we will have further debates in the future, and hopefully we can involve the diaspora very much stronger into Albanian domestic politics.
Yeah, thank you. There is nothing else to add. I mean, thank you, Sabine, Michael, Viorel, Dumitru, Muhamet, for all your contributions and your time, and hope to talk again about this issue in the future. And Flori will also like to have some final comments.
Cordial thanks from my side, not only to the panelists of this panel, also to those in the morning, but also to the people who listened and raised the questions on Facebook and on Zoom. Thank you from our hearts.
Yes, also from my side, thank you very much. We look forward to the next contributions from our side and the talks with different other panelists. Thank you very much and have a pleasant and warm days.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Dank.
All the best.
Cheers. Good luck.
Dank an die Katz.